our moderator for this evening, Brian Dillard.
Hi, y'all. Good evening, good evening, good evening. And thank you for showing up tonight. We did not have a snow scare, I guess, and so all San Antonians were able to make it out. So I'm going to start this off by handing it over to our Dream Week sponsor. Who all in here knows about Dream Week? Beautiful. All right. The rest of you are about to learn from Alexis here. So, Alexis, I'll hand it over to you.
Hey, thank you, Brian, so much. I really appreciate it. Hi, everyone. My name is Alexis, and I've been working with DreamWeek for the last 3 years. So I just wanted to give you a little overview. It's been an honor to be a part of DreamWeek. It's a celebration of ideas, diversity, and progress. DreamWeek is more than an event. It's a movement that inspires meaningful conversations and actions to shape a better future. This platform reminds us of the power of dialogue. By sharing our perspectives and embracing diversity, we strengthen our communities and create space for real change. Dream Week challenges us not to only dream boldly, but to act with purpose, turning vision into impact. As we gather here, let's collect, listen, and inspire one another to take those next steps, big or small, that lead to progress. Let this week be a spark, a reminder that united, we have the power to transform dreams into reality. Thank you for being here and for contributing your voice to this incredible celebration. Together, let's make every week a dream week.
Thank you, Lex. I will say, so I'm third generation Eastside San Antonio, and when Dream Week kicked off, I had just returned back home to San Antonio from a lot of military travel. And I will say it was a blessing because it actually does put all the efforts that we put into marching and protests into action. It makes sure that we continue that momentum throughout the year, and it is not just a celebration at one point in the year. So you'll notice the question I have at the end here for our wonderful panel will be about action items for the audience, which will be beautiful. And I will let you know we are live streaming as well. So we'll have that going. I'm Brian Dillard. Officially by day, I am the Vice President of IT for Via Metropolitan Transit. But by night, I am the husband to Marla Segura. And I'm the father to a little Shih Tzu named Ray Ray and a little Cairn Terrier named Nola. So I'm on that behalf tonight, so don't attribute anything I say tonight to Via. I am very proud to be here with this panel. We've got Jada, Paul, Ashley, and Iris. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but I do want to note, Jada came in within 2 hours of notice. We had Kerry Clack scheduled to be on the panel. Unfortunately, he is under the weather. So, one, best of luck, Kerry, and hope you feel better soon. Two, thank you for not bringing that crap in here. But Jada so bravely stood in for us. I had a conversation with her. I had never even met her before today, but I'm grateful for her being a part of the panel. So I'm going to hand it off to Jada, and we'll go through the introductions really quickly across the panel here.
All right. Well, thank you, Brian. Again, thank you for, calling. I know sometimes people don't want to call and ask at the last minute, but everything happens for a reason. And Carrie, I pray that all is well, and I hope you get better very soon. And I am looking forward to this conversation. My name is Jada Pickett. I am originally from Detroit. So I'm still mourning the loss of the Lions, you guys, but we had a really good season for sure. But I moved here about 23 years ago. So I lived here longer than I did Michigan, but still hardly home, but always repping. I actually live down here in downtown San Antonio. I love downtown San Antonio, and I work for KSAT. We have a lifestyle show called SA Live that airs every day, Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. to 11 a.m., and I am their multimedia journalist. I do a lot of stories out in the field. I connect within the community and share their stories, and I just call myself a storyteller. By day and night, I love visual storytelling, and I love connecting with people because I do believe that everybody has a story and everyone deserves for their story to be told. I too am a fur mom to a Shih Tzu by the name of Cosmo Love. So it's just me and my baby down here. And of course, I'm one of four. and 2 lovely parents. I call them Mama and Papa P. And yeah, looking forward to meeting everyone else.
I'm going to talk a lot less, I think, than Brian. My name's Paul Flahive. I'm a reporter and editor here at Texas Public Radio, and that is all I have for my bio.
Paul's a short speaker, if you didn't notice that. It's all guys, small speaker.
Oh, yeah, they want to know about dogs.
I have no dogs. Only cats. 2 cats. My wife is motioning that I have 2 cats. Thank you, honey.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. My name is Ashley Alvarado. I am in my 6th or 7th week as CEO here at Texas Public Radio. I absolutely love this event space and the opportunity that we have to come together. That's been a real through line in my career of just thinking about how journalists can really invest in, commit to community engagement and closing the gaps between community members and the journalists who aim to serve them. To continue with a couple themes, I'm from Oregon originally, so mourning that loss. It was so bad. And Ohio State fans are so happy. And then we recently adopted a puppy, which is part of our negotiation with our 10-year-old to move here. And so his name is Gnocchi, California.
Hi, my name's, it's working. My name's Iris Dimmick, and I'm the senior reporter for the San Antonio Report. And I have incredible imposter syndrome sitting next to all of these fine people. It's a real pleasure to be here with all of you.
When you feel imposter syndrome, it's actually how you know you belong.
Oh, okay, perfect. Okay, good. I actually grew up in Colorado, went to school in Washington State, and found my way down here. I was telling y'all earlier, was thinking I would just stay here for a few years and then move on, but I just bought a house a couple of years ago, and I've been here for 13 years. So I think it's safe to say I'm here to stay for a bit. And yeah, I've come to love San Antonio. So thanks.
You better be here to stay for a bit.
Yeah.
So I am greatly grateful for this panel in front of me, grateful for TPR to be able to host us. This actually came from a conversation at Bruno's. Anybody ever been to Bruno's in Southtown? You can clap. Paul and I like to link up for a beer every once in a while, and that's how you get business done. And we were talking about a fellowship that he's part of through the Pulitzer Center. He's accepted into. And it was, what I heard from him was, it's really getting past traditional journalism and putting things into action. It's engaging community in innovative ways or finding out how to do that in innovative ways. So Paul's focus is on the child welfare system here in Texas through this project. And so I was really intrigued by that. I thought it really needed to be a story that was told about how journalists are having to step out and do more than their traditional roles in society. So I thought, like, hey, we should talk about this publicly. And then it became a panel discussion for Dream Week. So I'm going to hand it over to Paul and ask him to please enlighten us on what the program is about and what you think your objectives are all about through this.
Yeah, so it's the first year, it's the inaugural year of the Story Reach Fellowship through the Pulitzer Center, and it's new, so they didn't know they shouldn't let me in, so that's good. And it's money for reporting, it's money for the work that we do, and I'm part of I think it's 9 people are in the cohort, and it's really about trying to breach kind of traditional, like you said, journalism, and try to get past what misinformation and the erosion of public trust in media has become. It was created specifically for that purpose. And to that end, some of the projects, which are really great, like some of these other projects that are in the cohort are fantastic. There's one on black maternal mortality in Indiana. There's one on access to reproductive care in like the deep South, like Louisiana Delta. There's stuff on water purity and lead contamination in Oakland, and some of the projects that they've done. Some of the things they're trying to do to get into these communities is offering, offering to test soil samples in people's yards for lead, sending out mass surveys in Maine to firefighters to talk about toxic chemicals in firefighting gear. So it's really not traditionally communities that would be, gravitating towards news media at this point, and it's been really interesting to watch. My project is not published, and it is not kind of a public one. It's more investigative in nature, so all of our engagement efforts, or most of our engagement efforts, will happen on the back end. But some of those things will include like a legislative push, like doing mass mailers to legislative staffs on the issues that we're going to be talking about and highlighting kids in their region that have been impacted. So it's things like that we wouldn't have traditionally thought to do in the past, or really even considered without these kinds of conversations that we've been having over the last 6-7 months with this fellowship cohort. So with that in mind, I think there's no shortage of things to talk about when it comes to media and its role in society right now. So I'll give it back to you.
Definitely been a crazy week. We had this conversation 3 or 4 months ago, and so this week seemed to be timely, apparently. I'm going to stay with you, Paul. And on that note, local journalism seems to play a unique role in shaping our communities. How do you see the relationship between local journalists and their audiences in San Antonio? And as a follow-up question, and this is for everybody, I'm going to come back to y'all. How can local journalism better serve communities that feel disconnected or underserved by mainstream media? And I want to note, I met Paul when I was Neighborhood Association Neighborhood Association president at Dignity Hill years ago.
That's true.
And so Paul engaged me from the community aspect. So again, local journalism plays a unique role in shaping our communities. How do you see the relationship between local journalists and their audiences in San Antonio?
Well, I think to turn it on its head a bit, we should be being informed and being impacted by communities rather than the other way around. I think that's been one of the failures of media in the last 30, 40 years, maybe even further, is that we have grown so insular at times. I don't think that's really possible anymore. And so, I just think how they are shaped, how they impact each other, all of this goes back to, in my opinion, like the number of journalists actually working in a community. And we've seen that decline kind of rapidly and dramatically in the last 50 years. So, and I think just going back to the mistrust in media kind of conversation point, most people have never talked to a journalist in their lives. And so I think that all leads to some of the narratives you hear about, quote unquote, the media and how it interacts. So hopefully, if we're doing our jobs, we're out there talking to neighborhood association presidents and trying to learn what are the issues that matter to folks in their communities.
For sure. I'm going to jump to Jada real quick. I'm sorry, Iris. I'm coming to you. Yeah, you've been here a while at San Antonio Report, Rivard Report, digging into communities. So I'm going to jump to Jada real quick because there is an important note I want to stand out here. It was a struggle. So I had Carrie Clack. I reached out to Bria Woods, and I was like, damn, any other black journalists in town here? And so I think that's a void that we have here in San Antonio. It goes back to the relevancy point to residents in conversations from media and journalism is you have to have somebody you trust in order to speak openly and candidly about all that. So, Jade, I want to speak to you as a young black woman here in this space in San Antonio. How do you feel like journalism plays a unique role in building communities?
Thank you. It plays a huge role. And one of the things I didn't share earlier was in my role as a multimedia journalist for SA Live, I'm the only black woman, the only black reporter specifically on SA Live. Now, KSAT has black reporters. I want to be clear on that, but for our show. And so, and the youngest reporter on SA Live. And though we get to be the bright spot in everyone's day on that show, it's still sharing stories, right? And what was so important to me, and I can say this now because I got the job, but one of the things that I expressed in my interviewing process was I don't see myself when I do watch the show. And prior to actually me applying to be the journalist, I used to go on the show as a guest, and I used to share about products and resources that were valuable to parents and caregivers because my background was in the private sector of childcare. And so it's very important that when we see ourselves reporting bleeding news, but also bright news in communities, regardless of if we are, there's a small percentage of us or a large percentage of us, credibility and being able to see yourself, you earn that trust because the person receiving the information on that other screen, and I know you guys can, attest to this, is that, it's hard to trust someone when you can't tell if they have experienced something that you've experienced or if they've been in those communities. And going back to what you were saying earlier, we do have to go back to being the ones that's informed as opposed to informing people, And so that is actually a part of my mission as a storyteller, to be someone who acknowledges the fact that there is a Black girl watching TV, there is a Black man watching television, and I don't have a traditional cookie cutter background in how I got to this space. And so I take pride in that even more, to know that there's a reason why I'm here, and it's beyond just acknowledgement or any amount of fame. So hopefully that answers your question. I'm a long-winded gal, you guys are probably getting to know that already, but very much so.
Iris, as a white woman, how do you want to follow up with that?
Pass. Listen,
Iris
Iris
and
and
I
I
are
had some
friends,
good
so-
conversations in the back. We already she got a good follow-up. She has a good one. I know she does.
Well, I think speaking to that point, as a white woman who has enough money to survive, who has the privilege of doing this job, I routinely have to check that privilege as well. The people I speak to, the communities I reach out to, they do not have it as easy as me. And I have kind of a small group of friends who we kind of rely on each other to check each other's privilege a little bit, because you can kind of get wrapped up in like, oh, I talked to the mayor today, I talked to so-and-so today. But like, the people who really matter the most are the people I speak to who live under the bridge, like who don't have time to come to events like this or go to city council meetings. So having a diverse and broad set of sources is so critically important to this work. I'll just leave it there.
Ashley, you're new to the community.
Yeah.
I am new. I'm very new. I keep looking at my watch, in part because my husband won't stop texting, but also because it was 2 months ago today that we packed up our car and drove from Southern California. I'm so grateful to be here and to come with the foundation of the work that I did in my 20 years in that state. But I think, kind of building on some of what folks have already said before, within journalism with a capital J, we have a tendency to mourn the loss of media literacy while refusing to invest in community literacy. And so when we take that time to deepen our understanding, to deepen and grow authentic relationships, we're in a position to design and deliver content that is reflective of the communities we're serving, that is relevant to the communities that we're serving, and that is meeting them in the ways that they consume information. And I'm really intentional about saying information because the way that we get folks what they need does not always look the same or sound the same. In public radio in particular, we have this devotion to great sound, and you love the sound of kids playing in the grass and the crunching and all of that. But sometimes, and I'm thinking specifically about work that I've done with parents and caregivers of children 0 to 5, they need a flyer on their mailbox, a postcard. I used to talk a lot about cubby distribution. How can I distribute the news at preschools? Thinking about how you get to people in ways that matter and that work for them. And so for all of us in journalism, before we start with that ask, let's start with a give. Let's start with that, and the other thing I would say, and I think this is particularly true in nonprofit media, and for those of us who practice engaged journalism, we can be right without being self-righteous. And so coming into all of this work, even as soapboxy as I sound right now, we can come into this work embracing humility and embracing empathy. And I know empathy has been a buzzword. I've read it in a lot of resumes as a skill, which tells me it's getting used a lot. But in design thinking, they define empathy as a willingness to have our assumptions challenged. And so I think when we bring that into the journalism work we do too, then it allows us to be surprised by our sources, to go in a different direction and to say, well, this is how we've done things, but this might not be how we need to do things moving forward.
I'm going to stay with you here. So you talk about empathy. You talked about like that should be a factor. How can journalists ensure their reporting is not only informative but also empathetic, acknowledging the human stories behind the facts? And kind of to dig into that deeper, can you share any personal stories where empathy and reporting changed the course of a story or led to a deeper connection within the community?
Sure. One of the things that I would say is when you're trying to bring this practice of engagement, one of the first things I would recommend is practicing it within your own organization. And I would say the same thing too about saying, oh, and believe me, the number of newsrooms who have said we want to reach younger and more diverse audiences, but not maybe have younger and more diverse staff members. That's going to be a hiccup. But really understanding the diversity of experiences that you're trying to reflect. And I'm part of a group called Gather, which is a community of practice for engaged journalists. And one of the first times that we did a gathering, we did an exercise. It has a horrible name. It's called The Wind Blows. But I know it's a horrible name, right? So everybody stands in a circle. And you'll say something like, the wind blows for everybody who has a Shih Tzu. And anybody who has that dog moves across the room. And you always start with a silly thing because you want to lighten the mood, right? And in this moment, it was about 100 journalists in Portland, Oregon. And somebody said, the wind blows for anybody who has a relative who's been incarcerated. And more than a third of the room moved. If you read most mainstream stories about people who have experienced incarceration or been affected by it, I don't think you would ever assume that. And so it's about, respecting that people's life experiences can make our journalism better. When it comes to an example of empathy showing up in the reporting, now I keep looking at Jada because I've done a lot of work on early childhood education. During late 2019, I was part of launching a project called Parenting Unfiltered. And it was working with parents across Southern California to train them on digital photography, and then to kind of send them out into the world to document their everyday lives. The project was wrapping up in like March of 2020, and everything changed. Everything shut down. And we were ready to understand that these parents were going through a lot and maybe this isn't what they wanted to do. And instead they said, we love you, which first of all, when people tell their journalists that they're working with that they love them, it's a good sign. But they said, we want to keep going. And what resulted from that, if anybody remembers all of the advertisements, the public, announcements that said, we're all in the same boat. What their photos really illustrated in an unimaginably impactful way was that we were all in the same storm. We were in very different boats. And so we were able to come through with this project to really create a space and hold that space for these parents, but to not put our lens on top of their experiences. And we followed the second year with childcare providers who have gone through so much, who make so much less than minimum wage most times. And by the way, in Southern California, many of them have been displaced. And one of the things that I am most proud of was that in that iteration, we ended up having a lot of cultural institutions, including like the 3rd Street Promenade, if anybody's ever been there in Santa Monica, say we want to put this up. And so in that location alone, we had more than 3 million people who saw these photos of these caregivers in their everyday lives, and the county actually recognized the participants.
I don't know if anybody else wants to share any stories about empathy in journalism and how that approaches. I see Jada pulling her mic.
Sure. I have so many stories. So I'm like thinking like, okay. But the most recent, specifically in this job, I want to speak to having empathy as a journalist. And I think one of the ways to kind of channel that and to live in your empathy as a journalist is to just see the person you're talking to, like see yourself in them. And so I did a story on a young woman here in San Antonio who started a run club. And it's called the Urban Run Club. So if you haven't heard about it, please, you got to join. This run club, you guys, because I know this, if I just leave it there and say she started a run club, it's like, oh, there's several run clubs in the city, which they're all amazing in their own right. But this run club in particular, over the course of just about 6 weeks, when I tell you it grew like nobody's business. And, by the name Urban Run Club, it can be assumed that it's just for Black people. It was founded by a Black woman. And the importance of that is because she went to other run clubs. She was training for a marathon that she wanted to run. But she is a mother. And through her experience, through some of the run clubs that she joined, she just didn't feel like she was welcomed with her child, and she had an unconventional schedule. And so she was like, well, listen, I'm not going to complain about not having access or feeling like I'm not a part of existing run clubs that I find. I'm going to start my own. And this is a single mother who has to take her child with her, wants to welcome her child around a lifestyle of running and healthy living. And when she was, just telling me the story, I saw my sister, who is a single mother, who takes pride in, maintaining a healthy lifestyle. And so it transformed the story, and it was less about me telling a story that I wanted to, make sure it was, perfect in every way. And it made me want to tell this story right. It made me remember that there are other single women, single mothers, parents, individuals who also want to feel a part. And so that shift in mindset changed the entire intentionality behind my storytelling. And it's less about being biased about anything, but more so about making sure that the stories that are being told and the information that is being given, it's accurate, not because you take pride in the fact of my role as a journalist, but because of the fact that people deserve accuracy. People deserve authenticity. People deserve to see a human behind a story that's being told. And I have so many stories that are like that, but that one stood out to me the most because I could just remember as I was standing behind the camera, because sometimes when I'm telling my stories, I'm sitting with my guests and, you see us both, but she needed that spotlight. And that it was a mom who also has a child, who also knows what it's like to just say, like, I'm just trying to run. I'm trying to train. She started something, and it proved itself to be a need, because it just, when I tell y'all the growth in this group, and it is for so many, it's BIPOC first, but it's also welcomes every community. And I just, that one will stay with me forever, because it also confirmed that I know the stories that I want to tell are stories that I want to be intentional about seeing. And so that is why I think empathy, how we can kind of show empathy within our storytelling while also maintaining, like you said, the accuracy and the intentionality behind it.
I wanted to jump in with one other thing, which is just a recognition of the fact that this is trauma negotiating work for journalists, and especially in the moment that we're in. And when people are, journalism, again, capital J, does not have a perfect track record, but has these emerging practices, is going out. Folks are doing the work to surface stories and to do it in a way that's not extractive. At the same time that journalists are being targeted, journalists are being jailed. And then again, going into these stories, and in Texas, and especially in recent years, it's a lot of trauma to negotiate. And so as newsrooms are working to do all of this, to also have the conversations, to know about the resources that exist and the opportunities to bring more resources to journalists.
I also think that empathy can kind of tying this back to what we were talking about earlier about building trust in communities as well. The more empathy that you put out, the more likely you're going to get it back. And I think, and you can't expect to get it back. It's not a guarantee. It's not a transaction of equal empathy. But I think that, by following up with a source, weeks after a story ran about them, even if you're not working on a story, asking them about their day, how they've been, seeing what they need, if they're okay, that goes a long way to putting a human face to the media. And like Paul said, oftentimes the one time they talk to me or any of y'all is the one time in their life they will talk to a journalist. And I think anytime we can bring a little humanity to that exchange should be welcome.
Grab a beer with your local journalist. That'll build a good relationship.
That's where the real conversations happen.
That's where it happens. So we've spoken a lot about the current kind of media landscape a little bit, but I want to dive deeper into that. It's been a weird week, huh? So, Paul, I'm going to jump to you. Oh, great.
I love his response.
Paul, why is journalism more critical than ever in today's media landscape where information is often unvetted or sensationalized? And I'm going to give you a little more context here. How do you think journalism can reclaim its trusted role in communities amidst the noise of social media and unverified sources?
No, I'd really love to hear Ashley's take on this. I wish I had an answer for that. I mean, I know that it's critical, and I know that we do everything we can, and I know that we're going to keep trying to meet people where they're at. But in terms of how do we reclaim, I mean, we're facing some of the most challenging environments that journalism has ever faced in this country, where truth doesn't really have the same value as it once did, and I'm sure this is something Ashley can talk about, where, with the looming threat of artificial intelligence and how it will be used by non-journalists to disseminate information is very that's just in the ether. I don't really know how we reclaim it, but I just, we're going to keep trying.
All right, I'm going to stick to you, Paul. Sorry. Because I feel like you're doing the work of maybe not reclaiming it, but owning it, continuing to own it.
Well, I'm very proud of what I do. I think we all are up here. And so, what was your question? I just wanted to say that. I'm really proud.
Maybe I'm asking, why do you maintain integrity in your reporting? I'll leave it at that.
I hope I do. I mean, that's a question for the people I interview, probably more than for me. But I don't know, man. I really don't. I feel like for some people, I don't know that I could do another job. I don't know that I have the temperament or the social grace to be anything else. Even in journalism, there are I couldn't do your job, that's for sure. So I don't have I don't know. I have a lot of non-answers for you. But I guess, first of all, it's our reputations are really important in this business. And so that's a huge reason to do everything you can to be upfront. Yeah. And I hate feeling like I've misled someone. And so I'm often over communicating what the context is for a lot of things when I can. There are certain stories where you just can't do that, and you need to be, asking the questions you have to ask of public officials, et cetera. But anyway.
Thank you for letting me continue to pull that out of you. Ashley.
I think there are a few things. The first is just a flat out statement of, in order to do this, we have to stay in business. And in order to stay in business, we have to be relevant and we have to be useful. And we have to earn the support of all of you and those in our communities. I was thinking as Paul was talking, one of the things that my son and I always talk about is we listen with our ears and our actions. And so to bring that to our journalism, but also one really important friendly amendment to your question is that in some cases we're not rebuilding trust because we never had it. And so also acknowledging that, we're not starting with a blank canvas when we are working with different communities or different, opportunities. But also with what Paul said, I would just say in the moment that we are in, I think it's critical that journalists develop not only a fluency in how we do our work, but how our work works. What do we know our respective mission statements? Do we understand our business models? Do we understand how, for us in TPR, how we pay our bills and keep going so that we can support the whole system and move it forward? And then I also think right now, in particular, and with some of the challenges that we're, or rather with the uncertainty of the future of federal funding for public media, we have to know exactly what we're doing and to do it with discipline. There are very, very, very good advocacy journalism organizations. That's not what we are. I always say we don't advocate, we activate. And we can catalyze and convene conversations, but we need to understand those boundaries and we need to adhere to them. And so, I think, first of all, I always love going into the newsroom and Paul's there and having those conversations, but also, like, Paul's a kind
He's
of
the only person.
That legacy of Paul.
Yeah,
I'm still new.
I'll pass.
But you're like the reporter you see in movies, which is always exciting, and the kind of accountability reporting to hold power
Chubby.
to account is really, really important. And it's not easy, but it is part of what makes this kind of work essential.
You don't have to.
This has nothing to say about why journalism is more critical than
such
ever.
a huge question. Paul said what I would have said probably, that I it's so huge. It's so much bigger than all of us. But I think that meeting people where they are, and to some extent we're doing that tonight. Like in journalism school, they're not, like, I never learned about, and your outlet should probably have community engagement events, and you should, like, host bike rides with your neighborhood and things like that. Like, that was just never part of the conversation. And I think just as a lot of outlets might shy away from using social media or TikTok or anything like that, that is meeting people where they're at. You may not like it, you might not like the name of TikTok or who owns it or whatever, like, but if you're not meeting people where they are, then what are you doing?
Do better.
Yeah. Exactly.
There's one thing with what you just said too. Some of you may have even heard me say this, but in the last 2 decades, we've lost more journalism jobs than coal mining jobs. So when you talk about the importance and criticality of this work, there are fewer and fewer journalists and jobs every year. And so I think it is something for us to keep in mind in the context of this conversation.
Absolutely. And so we'll pivot a little bit, but we'll focus on the quality of journalism and our responsibilities as consumers of journalism. So misinformation can obviously erode trust within communities. How can we as consumers of news better discern credible sources of information? And again, context. How do you as journalists deal with ethical dilemmas when you report on stories that could be misinterpreted or twisted? Iris, I'm going to go to you first.
Okay. Well, I think to the last part of your question, how to kind of deal with, like, unintended consequences, right? I think is what you're getting at there, is that we have conversations fairly often in our newsroom about, whether or not giving attention, or they used to call it giving ink. We don't have ink anymore, but giving ink to an issue, like whether or not it rises to that, because the more headlines there are about something that maybe actually might turn out to be inaccurate or false, the more damage is done at the end of the day. And the first part of your question, I'm sorry.
So misinformation can erode trust within communities. How can we, as consumers of news, better discern credible sources of information? And you cannot pitch San Antonio Report.
Yeah, why don't you check out the San Antonio Report.org? No. Yeah, I mean, I think digital literacy, I would hope is getting taught more and more. I've seen some like college courses in some various colleges that actually teach this. Honestly, it should be probably taught in kindergarten. But I think it's just really a matter of, when you're online looking at the website, you could even like call a phone number if there's a phone number on the website if you're really not sure, because some of these kind of AI websites that kind of crawl all of our websites and copy and paste it, they look kind of legit, and they have like, oh, here's a reporter and his name is so and so, and but I think so that's a lot to put on a consumer to like have them go out and do the research. I think to some extent it's a little bit our responsibility just to let folks know that like, hey, this is happening. Just so you know, this is our content, not their content, and I don't know. I mean, that at the same time, it's like you don't want to see a couple news outlets fighting against each other, saying that this one's more legit than the other. But I think there's a role that we can play to kind of, since we don't have an agency necessarily overseeing all of the media, like we are the fourth estate, but that comes with no infrastructure, except for some of the legacy folks. But I think it's kind of on us a little bit to share that and to help people navigate their local, especially local media landscapes.
There are some.
There are websites.
Well, I was going to say there are some organizations doing work in this space. There's an association called Namely, NAMLE, which is for media literacy educators. And they work quite a bit with PBS and other early childhood creators. So if you're watching Daniel Tiger, you're learning about civics and democracy. You're learning about some of those ways to discern.
Please don't tell the president that.
Yes. There's also, for any of you who are interested, Poynter, Poynter, is a media education institute, and they operate a number of fact-checking resources and media literacy resources. For those of you who are on Instagram, they have a program called MediaWise, and MediaWise has a lot of ambassadors. So like there's a great content creator under the news desk, and there are folks who are just out there on the internet helping people get equipped to decipher or to have those conversations. And then I would say one tool that more and more journalists are using actually comes from the mediation world. Amanda Ripley, who wrote the book Complicating the Narrative, has an agency called Good Conflict, and they basically teach you how to be in conversation and to bridge conflict in it. But the tool for mediation that they use, if any of you have gone to couples counseling, is called looping or mirroring. And so it might be, like I'll say like, Paul, you said this thing, and then you're like, Ashley, that is not what I said. Oh. And I'll say, okay, so you say it again, and I repeat it back to you. Yeah. And you're building trust in real time so that coming out of the conversation, there's a sense. And I would say that some of the best examples of this have been, political divides, but also when you do have a journalist who's coming from a different background from the folks that they're covering, to do that in real time, because, and I hadn't thought about this in years, I remember I was doing work in the Coachella Valley, which is where Palm Springs is, but also some of where the most poverty is in the state of California. And this woman, I was interviewing her, they're talking, and she goes, I did this interview, and then my cousin sent me the front page of the paper, and it was my photo, and it said the new face of poverty. Oh. And she said, in no way was that the conversation that we had, and in no way is that how I see myself. And the amount of trust that was eroded, and it's not disinformation, it's just not getting it. Yeah. But I interrupted.
No, you actually were going down the same path I was going down, which was essentially putting it back on our end of utilizing the media and social media to educate our, we have to remember that consumers of media were not trained on how to decipher between the two. And another really great content creator who I just adore her. She's widely known on TikTok. Her name is Kelsey. I think her Instagram is Kel's Crush or Kelsey Crush, and her passion is preserving print media and print news, and she's like fascinated with reading the newspaper, and I just love it. Like, she's just this like Gen Z Black girl, like loving print media, and she teaches you exactly like how to read the paper, how to verify it, and it's just so like eloquently done. I just it makes me want to get a newspaper, and so it teaches just how, then you become empowered on how to, in this storm of misinformation, and because years and years and years and years ago, you couldn't really, misinform people because of word of mouth. People were able to be like, wait a minute, like you said, going back to, like you said, going to Paul and saying, you said this, and he can say, actually, I did not say that. And there was a time where when word of mouth news was the prominent source of receiving news, people could verify or deny that. And now, because of AI, because everyone can turn their phone on and become a lowercase journalist, if we will, you have to combat that. And so we combat that by empowering our consumers on how you can decipher between those two, the questions to ask and those sources. We have to remember that part of our job in storytelling and sharing and informing is also informing them how to properly inform themselves as well.
So my last spicy question. In a polarized world, how can journalism maintain its integrity while also fostering a sense of unity and understanding among readers with differing viewpoints? Context. Do you think journalism today should focus on bridging gaps between polarized groups, or is it simply about presenting facts? I told you it's spicy.
Why can't we all just get along? Yeah, no, that's me.
I was sharing a quote that the head of American Public Media shared earlier this week. It was an MLK quote. And it was, people hate each other because they fear each other. They fear each other because they don't know each other. And they don't know each other because they don't communicate with each other. And they don't communicate with each other because they are separated from each other. And I was thinking about the power of convening and that opportunity. And I think the struggle that so many newsrooms are having is, how do you convene without platforming misinformation or platforming hate? And that solution is a work in progress, because it is so easy to get it wrong. I think the fellowship that Paul's doing and the kind of work that comes through community engagement, which, by the way, is built on the foundational work of community advocacy groups and understanding that there are so many people who figure this out in journalism. Maybe it's a little late to the game. But to be in conversation, to think about how you practice, and I slip into jargon really fast, I just want to acknowledge that. But there is a kind of question asking called appreciative inquiry. And I was telling Brian that when I do listening sessions, one of the things that I will always ask community members is, imagine a time that mainstream media is getting your story, the story of you and your community, right. How does it look, and how do you recognize it? And I love that question because, first of all, it takes it off of me to identify how this person identifies. I'm not projecting onto them. I'm asking them to self-identify. And then I'm asking them a generative question where they're saying, oh, it's this, And I held a session with self-identified conservative voters last spring and asked a question similar to that. But one of the things saying, like, how do you feel welcomed into a media organization's coverage? And the head of the Orange County GOP had said, I want to be challenged and reflected. Another person, and it was a weird moment because he goes, do you want to know why I launched a campaign against you? And I was like, you launched a campaign against us. So that was like my first moment. And then he said, I called in and I heard my comment ridiculed. And I don't know, I didn't hear that incident. I don't know exactly what happened. But the experiences, the concerns that people are expressing are rooted in something. And so when you are a witness and recognize that that something is something, I think you can build off of it. But we're in a moment where I think if we want to be in this work long term and if we want to see it through, we have to have a willingness to sit in our own discomfort. And that's hard. But I think for us as journalists and also just for community members wanting to be good neighbor is something that we have to think about.
I think what I thought about was my job. I joke around all the time. Well, I don't joke, but I say a lot. We get to be the sunshine in like people's day. We come on at 10 a.m. You've watched some heavy news in the morning time, necessary news that you need to hear. But, a lot of times those stories are bleeding news. And then you come on over to us and we're talking about, things going on locally in the community. And, sometimes because we do it every day, we might, maybe discount that sometimes and might think, oh, well, we may not think our job is as significant, but it's necessary. And I'm so proud of our network to have and welcome a show like this, because to your point, we need that hope. We need to keep in mind that like everybody ain't trying to receive all that heaviness all day. Like I just want some coffee too. Like what kind of hope do I have to look forward to today too? Like hearing about the being informed positively and, on the unfortunate side, a lot of times with stories, I think that balance, we need both sides of that. And I just even having this conversation, it makes me happy to be in conversation to remind myself even that piece of hope matters, because it also plays into that trust factor, because that is what makes that person turn back on that news to know that like, okay, I trust this reporter who's giving me this information. I also trust, that it's coming from a good place, because they care about me receiving not just the heavy stuff, but also that sunshiny stuff too. Like, let me go down to that coffee shop and that you just told me just opened up, So
It's about true community.
yeah, and that is how you gain that trust, and that is community advocacy as well.
I think there's something what you said too about who gets to be joyful in the reporting that we do.
Yeah.
And so when organizations do source diversity tracking, one of the opportunities there is, when we talk about experts in our stories, what's the makeup of the experts? When we talk about, the positive things that's happening, what's the makeup there? And to reflect that the diversity of the joy. I mean, I think that work that you're doing is really important.
Thank you.
I'll move away from the spicy now. And I want some questions from the audience. We've got 5 minutes until we got 1 minute left. Maddie P, can you set a 5-minute timer for me? Thank you, sir. Do we have any Q&A from the audience? Anybody want to step up and ask any questions? If not, that's okay. I did warn y'all it's going to be spoken word. So. Yes, sir. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Mike's over here. I'm sorry. Yeah, Mike stands right over here. Don't be shy, y'all.
Hi. One of the things, I noticed we're talking about this panel about like reflecting local community and having empathy, is that I noticed that I don't think any of you guys are actually from San Antonio. And so I guess like, is there a better way for us to reflect community by actually having journalists from the city?
I'm from San Antonio, but I'm not a journalist though. So yeah.
No, he's right. I'm from Omaha, Nebraska.
Ooh, sorry.
Hey. Spends one
And then we fight.
month on an Air Force base.
Culver's
Thinks
was
he
great.
knows.
Sorry. My bad.
I think it's a great question. I think TPR has a lot of folks that are from here. I'm not one of them, but I think San Antonio actually is a pretty transplanted city as well. So in some ways we are representing, but I take the point. I don't have a great answer for it, other than that I know that We've got some great local journalists that came up here.
There's a journalism professor who wrote a piece a number of years ago that said the pipeline's not the problem, in talking about some of the bigger challenges on diversity in journalism. But I do think that really having strong journalism internship programs goes a long way. And so I was excited during my ongoing onboarding process to see the kind of commitment that we've made here. And I think that opportunity, and just to make sure that we're recognizing the programs that exist, and that you don't have to have one specific way of getting into journalism to be successful.
Love that.
Iris, you've been for a minute.
Sorry.
And in journalism here in San Antonio for a minute. So I
Yeah.
want to get your reflection on transplant journalism.
I think it's a very valid question, and I get it kind of directly and indirectly all the time. Like, you're not from here, kind of what are you doing here type of vibe. But I totally acknowledge I didn't grow up here. I don't know like the high school maps of and
Yeah,
what
that was going to be my
what high
first
school
question
you
for
went
this panel.
to.
Was what high school did you go to?
I went to school without walls in Grand Junction, Colorado.
I went to school without windows.
Shush.
It was built during a time where they thought windows and nature were going to distract the students.
Perfect.
They were
Bowden.
distracted.
That's Bowden like 3 years ago.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, I think to some extent, I of course, I'm obviously biased, but I think we can bring other perspectives from outside, the bubble that is our own neighborhood, our own city, our own county. I think it can be valuable as well. But
Sir?
thanks.
Hi, my name's Pete Bella, and I'm from San Antonio, so there you go.
What high school, Pete?
Churchill.
Oh, okay. I'm Sam Houston, so I can't remember.
Well, that's almost as good. That's okay. So my question is about science literacy, and I say that because I think that the great sleeper story is climate change that is not getting any relevant reporting, in the sense of, when I so often hear about events, I don't hear about weather events, and then they tie it directly to climate change, especially in Texas. Maybe it's a little bit of a conservative or paranoid, I'm not sure what it is, but the bottom line is science literacy is something that we're missing, and people need to understand what is going on, and it's a slow grind, but it's there sure as daylight. Thank you.
For what it's worth, I think as more newsrooms get fluent on data and how stories are performing, one of the things that is also a sleeper is that climate stories tend to perform really well. And so it might not be said out loud, but those stories tend to, across the board, perform well. It's also a somewhat untapped focus area when it comes to foundation support. And there are a number of organizations, including GRIST, that are regularly producing. And I don't work for PBS's children education programming, but I will say that they've also worked to incorporate a lot. And when you look at some of the researchers that have talked about intervention points, it's the early childhood education program. So you'll hear stories, and I think NPR has done a pretty good job of covering this too, of how you're teaching water conservation to preschoolers. Because when you think about what are the levers that get parents to change their minds, it's based on this panel, it's our kids and our dogs and 2 cats.
Sir.
Hi, I'm Phil Zamora. I'm also from San Antonio. So I've heard a lot of conversation that seems to be focused on reclamation. How do we reclaim journalistic integrity? But I want to take this in a different direction. I recently had an opportunity to stand in front of 6th graders, and we were waiting for an English language arts teacher to come and take the room permanently, but I had them for like 6 weeks at the beginning of the school year. And I was given an opportunity to challenge them with their first written assignment. And I said, pick something that you know about to write so that you can write about it. What are you interested in? Yeah. And the answer that I got most frequently was, I'm not interested in anything. Okay, so as a consumer of media, there is so much out there to consume. How do we reach people, young people in particular, and not lose a generation because they don't have any interest, any real interest in anything. So it's not about reclaiming, it's almost about redefining.
Yes.
Okay? That's so what do we do to reach people who say I'm not interested in anything?
Oh my gosh. I literally just listened to a podcast that talked about this very thing. It was more so on the adult, because adults are experiencing this too. We are shifting in careers, you know, what we have been raised, how we've going to school, everything is shifting career-wise. And so when it comes to thinking about what we want to do, people don't feel like they belong. People don't feel like they have any interest. I was having this conversation with, you know, amongst my community, but going back to the younger generation, because I'm so passionate about the kiddos, even still in the work that I do, how we reach them in the sense of what you said, redefining exactly what that even all looks like what your interests are. I think kids have caught on to a certain way that our world used to be, and they are growing up in a world that we are still even learning and understanding, and that we don't even know. We've got AI, we have anyone can build a personal brand and grow, and business looks different, and they are trying to find their place in the world. And I think that is our opportunity to pour into them. And so when a child is not having any interest, it's really another way of them saying they don't know, they don't feel significant enough to even feel like there's something worth investing in. And so that's our opportunity to remind them of their worth. I think that some of the most impactful conversations come from relatability and reaching the child of saying, you know, I was just thinking like I didn't have any interest the other day too. And then I went for a walk. And then, you know, you have to meet them where they're at in the most innocent way, and also remind them that it's okay to not have it all figured out. I remember when I was a kid, my mom used to tell me that I was going to be a journalist because all the reports at school were the same. They were like, she's great. She just talks a lot. That was and my mom was just like, you know, you should be a journalist. And I thought she was boxing me in, but she saw I thought at the time I didn't know what I wanted to do. I had all these talents, and yet I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was a child. But yet my mom, it was so obvious to her. She was like, you watch Oprah all the time. Like, you come home from school and you want to watch Oprah. Like, what, you know, what elementary school kid wants to do that? And so it was so clear to her, but it was so unclear to me. And so without her trying to control, but instead just pour into me, as an adult, I found my way without her necessarily holding my hand. But it was because they allowed me the space and the reassurance that it's okay to not know what you're interested in. And so I think we can pour into them, and we can also just confirm it's okay, and also let them know we are redefining too, and that's why. So hopefully that answered somewhat your question.
So Maddie P let me down on my 5-minute warning. Oh, but this young lady, I have to answer. Oh, yes, absolutely. Here, I'll bring the mic to you. Can I? Go. Shoot, she's got the vocals.
I just moved here from Ciudad Juarez, Mexico.
Hi.
I was there 29 years. One of the things we did was receive border awareness groups, people that wanted to know what was happening. And so I had many things up in the patio to teach them. One was about the journalists in Mexico.
Wow.
1993 to now, 340 killed. 340 killed. I had their name, where they were from, who they worked for.
Wow.
And in Juarez, 2 were killed while I was there. One was a friend. He was a journalist for the daily newspaper. And the other was on the radio. So you are blessed. You are blessed that you can be so free to say the truth and to help all of us understand what's happening.
It's
Thank
beautiful.
you.
Yeah, round of applause for that. I think it's something that I think most of the folks in the room don't take for granted, especially these folks in front of you tonight. I do want to leave with one comment from each of our panelists around an actual takeaway for the audience. What can everyday citizens do to help counter misinformation and support ethical journalism in context? How can individuals better engage with the media they consume and advocate for journalistic integrity in their own communities? Iris, I will start from your end and we'll come back this way.
Well, before I let this close, I want to note I have 2 dogs and 1 cat. And the dogs are Riker and Harlow, and the cat is Mr. Pocket. Forgot to mention that earlier. It's a very critical piece of information. What can y'all do? How good journalists now? I think ask questions, and I don't mean that like, yes, ask us questions. That's cool too. I love answering questions, but I think ask each other questions. Like when somebody comes to you, when a friend or a family member, who maybe you only see on Thanksgivings, comes to you with an article that is just, oh, you're not sure about that. Ask them questions. Where did you see this? Have you seen this anywhere? This information anywhere else? You know, like I would encourage folks to just engage with each other. I know that's like really corny, but I would ask you to not dismiss each other as easy and bring some of that empathy that we're trying to bring, that y'all are trying to bring, that nonprofits all over the country are trying to bring to the conversation. I think, we're not going to be able to do it without that. So thanks.
If you know nothing about me, you'll know that I like to do 2 answers. One is hold us accountable. To Iris' point, ask questions. If we're not getting it right, reach out. I'm going to tell you the TPR email addresses are really easy to figure out. I'm ashley@tpr.org. I might not answer you right away, but I'll answer you. The other thing is if you're able to financially support the journalism that you depend on. A lot of subscriptions, a lot of memberships are less than a cup of coffee. And it goes a really long way. But again, I think is it 2 newsrooms? I'm looking around. I think it's 2 newsrooms are shuttering a week right now across the country. And so at a time that and everybody in this room is recognizing the importance of having accurate information to help you navigate everyday life, understanding that this is a relationship. It's not transactional, except for the deposit. And it's something where we can make each other stronger.
Just going off both those comments, I mean, as I appreciate people that reach out, I would say like I've seen so many people engaging in just bad faith attacks on journalists and on people that really do spend quite a bit of time trying to get it right. And that's my only takeaway for folks that I talk to most of the time is like just, I don't have any problem with people asking questions or challenging me, but let's make sure that we're engaging in good faith, conversation rather than just social media fun.
I would say utilize some of those resources that were shared too. There are very helpful resources that help you kind of fact check and make sure what you're being informed by is legitimate. And also just remember that the journalists that tell these stories are humans. It's not to give any excuse. It's just to remind. As much as we try to stay in that mind frame too, I think it's just even more helpful on the other end as well. And so, and watch us. Keep watching us, you guys. That's all I got.
Stay engaged, y'all. Thank you so much for being here. I think you heard it from a number of our panelists tonight that it's important to them to express these thoughts and get these ideas out to you all. It helps them think through their own kind of challenges and their own experiences. So this is helpful for them. I hope it was helpful for you all. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you for TPR for hosting us. Be sure to support the resources that are definitely going to be challenged from here on out, including TPR, NPR, KLRN, and PBS. And I'm sure I forgot some other ones. San Antonio Report. Sorry. Remember those independent journal resources that we depend on so much. So thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.
And give a round of applause for Brian. The questions that he's posed are so good. Thank you, Brian.
That was cool.